What happens when a tiny island nation sits right between two giants fighting for control of the what if the world's safest place for your fortune isn't hidden in the Alps anymore, but tucked away on a tiny island in Southeast Asia? For nearly a century, Switzerland was the undisputed king of secret money. Numbered accounts, snow-capped vaults, bankers who would rather go to prison than whisper a client's name. But something has quietly shifted. Today, the ultra-rich are packing their fortunes into private jets and flying them not to Zurich or Geneva, but to a small, humid island called Singapore. It sounds strange at first. Switzerland still has the reputation, the history, the mystique. Yet behind closed doors, family offices are multiplying in Singapore faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. Billionaires are relocating their entire lives there. So what changed? Why did the world's wealthiest people quietly turn their backs on the country that basically invented private banking and fall in love with a city-state smaller than New York City? Stick around, because the 10 reasons behind this massive shift are honestly more fascinating than any spy movie, and they reveal exactly how the ultra-wealthy think about power, safety, and money in this new era. Point 1. Swiss secrecy basically died. For most of the 20th century, Switzerland's superpower was silence. In 1934, the country passed a banking law that made it a criminal offense for a banker to reveal a client's identity. That single law built an empire of trust, and trillions of dollars flowed into Alpine vaults because of it. But that world ended. Under pressure from the United States and the European Union, Switzerland signed onto something called automatic exchange of information. In simple terms, Swiss banks now have to report account details to a client's home government almost automatically. The secret handshake is gone. The mystery is gone. For a billionaire trying to keep wealth private and protected from prying eyes back home, Switzerland today offers barely more privacy than a bank in London or New York. This was the single biggest crack in the foundation. Once the secrecy disappeared, billionaires had to ask themselves a hard question. If Switzerland is no longer quiet, what exactly are we paying for? That question sent very serious money hunting for a new home, and Singapore was ready and waiting with open arms. Point 2. Singapore still guards its vaults fiercely. While Switzerland opened its books to foreign tax authorities, Singapore built one of the strictest banking confidentiality laws left standing anywhere in the world. Under the Banking Act, revealing customer information without proper authorization can lead to serious criminal penalties for the banker involved. Singapore does participate in some international reporting standards, but its application tends to be narrower, its enforcement culture more protective of the client, and its courts far less willing to hand over information on a whim. For a billionaire, that difference is everything. It is not just about dodging taxes anymore. It is about protecting a family from kidnapping threats, protecting a business from rival espionage, and protecting generational wealth from being picked apart by hostile lawsuits or unstable governments back home. Singapore built its entire brand around being the one place where discretion is still sacred. Bankers there are trained almost like guardians of a vault, not just employees processing paperwork. In a world where almost every other financial center has been forced open, Singapore remains one of the last fortresses standing, and the wealthy noticed immediately. Point 3. Almost zero tax on foreign wealth. Here's where things get really juicy. Singapore runs what is called a territorial tax system. This means the government generally only taxes income earned inside Singapore itself. If a billionaire earns money from investments, businesses, or assets located outside the country, that income is usually not taxed at all when it lands in Singapore. On top of that, there is no capital gains tax, meaning profits from selling stocks, property, or business stakes are not clipped by the government the way they are in most Western countries. There is also no inheritance tax and no estate tax, so fortunes can pass from one generation to the next without the government taking a massive slice. Compare that to Switzerland, where wealthy residents often negotiate a special lump sum tax deal, but that deal now starts at a minimum yearly bill that can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and some regions have voted to scrap the arrangement completely. Singapore simply offers a cleaner, more predictable, and often cheaper path. For people managing billions, predictability is worth more than gold, and Singapore delivers it in spades. Point 4. The family office explosion. Over the last several years, Singapore has seen an explosion in something called family offices. These are private firms set up purely to manage the wealth, investments, and legacy planning of a single ultra-rich family. A decade ago, there were only a handful in Singapore. Today, there are well over 1,000, and the government actively encourages more to open through generous tax incentives and streamlined licensing. Singapore essentially rolled out the red carpet, creating fast-track approval processes and dedicated government units whose entire job is to help billionaires set up shop smoothly. This created something powerful, a snowball effect. As more family offices opened, more lawyers, accountants, private bankers, and wealth advisors moved to Singapore to serve them. That created a dense, sophisticated ecosystem where a billionaire can get every service they need for managing a fortune, all within a few square miles. Switzerland has this too, built over centuries, but Singapore built a modern, digital, incredibly efficient version of it in a fraction of the time, and busy billionaires love efficiency. Point 5. A political fortress in a messy world. Billionaires are obsessed with stability, because instability is the single biggest threat to a fortune. Switzerland has long been famous for neutrality, but it sits right in the middle of Europe, a continent currently dealing with war anxiety, energy crises, and constant political friction from the European Union. Singapore, on the other hand, operates almost like its own bubble. It has a famously stable government, extremely low crime rates, and a legal system respected around the world for being fair and predictable. The country has managed to stay largely outside the messy political battles of larger powers while building deep trading relationships with practically everyone, including the United States, China, and the European Union at once. For a billionaire worried about wars, sanctions, or sudden political upheaval wiping out their wealth overnight, Singapore feels like a safe harbor in the middle of a storm. It is a tiny island that has mastered the art of staying friendly with everyone while depending on no one. And that kind of quiet, careful diplomacy is exactly what nervous money looks for when deciding where to drop anchor for the next 50 years. Point 6. The gateway to Asia's new money. Here is something crucial that people often miss. The center of global wealth creation is shifting east. China, India, Indonesia, and Vietnam are producing new millionaires and billionaires at a staggering pace. Switzerland, sitting in the heart of Europe, is simply too far away to be the natural home base for this new generation of Asian wealth. Singapore sits right in the middle of it all, just a short flight from Shanghai, Mumbai, Jakarta, and Tokyo. For an entrepreneur who built a fortune in Asia, keeping their money close to home in a familiar time zone, with English as the common business language, simply makes more sense than shipping it halfway across the planet to a snowy country they rarely visit. Singapore positioned itself perfectly as the financial gateway to the fastest-growing region on Earth. Even wealthy Americans and Europeans are drawn here now because they want exposure to Asian markets and businesses, and having your money already sitting in Singapore makes those investments faster and easier to manage. Switzerland cannot compete with geography, and geography, it turns out, matters enormously in modern finance. Point 7. A lifestyle built for the ultra-wealthy. Money does not just want safety, it wants comfort too. Singapore offers an incredibly high quality of life, with clean streets, extremely low crime, world-class healthcare, and some of the best international schools on the planet. English is widely spoken, which removes a huge barrier for global families relocating from anywhere in the world. The food, the architecture, the climate, the modern infrastructure, all of it creates a lifestyle that feels safe, luxurious, and endlessly convenient. Billionaires are not just parking money in Singapore. Many of them are moving their entire families there to actually live. Switzerland certainly has beauty, with its mountains and lakes, but it can feel closed off, expensive in a different way, and harder to navigate for someone coming from Asia or the Middle East without European roots. Singapore feels open, modern, and welcoming to global citizens from any background. When the world's richest families choose where to raise their children and build their permanent home base, that emotional and lifestyle pull often matters just as much as any tax advantage on a spreadsheet. Point 8. Rock-solid legal protection for assets. Wealthy families do not just worry about taxes, they worry about lawsuits, divorces, business disputes, and political enemies trying to seize their assets. Singapore has built an extremely strong legal framework specifically designed to protect wealth from these threats. Its courts operate under a common law system, similar to the United Kingdom, which many international business people already understand and trust. The country has also developed specialized legal structures, including a modern trust framework and something called the variable capital company, which allows families to organize complex investment holdings with strong legal protection and flexibility. These structures make it incredibly difficult for outside parties, whether it is an ex-spouse, a business rival, or an unstable foreign government, to reach in and seize assets held in Singapore. Switzerland certainly has strong legal traditions too, built over centuries, but Singapore's system was designed more recently, specifically with modern global wealth and cross-border families in mind. It is essentially a legal fortress engineered from the ground up for exactly this purpose, and that precision is incredibly attractive to anyone protecting a massive fortune. Point 9. Efficiency that old money cannot match. Switzerland's private banking system is beautiful, but it can also be slow, bureaucratic, and steeped in old-fashioned tradition that does not always fit modern needs. Singapore, by contrast, built its financial system almost entirely in the digital age. Opening accounts, transferring assets, setting up companies, and managing complex investment structures can often be done faster and with far less paperwork than in older European financial centers. The government actively invests in financial technology, digital banking infrastructure, and streamlined regulatory processes to keep the country competitive. For billionaires managing businesses across multiple countries and time zones, speed and efficiency are not luxuries, they are necessities. Every day of delay in moving money or closing a deal can cost real value. Singapore essentially took the trust and stability that made Switzerland famous and rebuilt it using 21st-century tools instead of 19th-century traditions. That combination of old-world discretion and new-world speed is incredibly rare, and it is a huge reason billionaires increasingly see Singapore as the more modern, more practical choice for managing serious money. Point 10. The global shift nobody saw coming. Perhaps the biggest reason of all is the sheer scale of the trend itself. Recent wealth migration data shows record numbers of millionaires relocating internationally, with Singapore consistently ranking among the very top destinations worldwide, often scoring higher than Switzerland on measures of overall wealth competitiveness. This is not a small, quiet trickle of money anymore. It is becoming one of the largest wealth migrations in modern history. When one billionaire moves and quietly builds a comfortable, protected, tax-friendly life in Singapore, others notice. Word spreads fast within these tight-knit circles of ultra-wealthy families and their advisors. Success breeds imitation, and imitation breeds momentum. Every new family office that opens in Singapore attracts more service providers, which attracts more wealthy clients, which attracts even more infrastructure. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle that is very hard for any competing country to break. Switzerland built its reputation over 2 centuries. Singapore built a serious rival to it in barely 2 decades, and right now, the momentum is almost entirely on Singapore's side. So there you have it, 10 powerful reasons why the world's richest people are quietly shifting their fortunes away from the snowy vaults of Switzerland and toward the glittering skyline of Singapore. It really comes down to a simple truth. Money does not just chase secrecy anymore. It chases stability, speed, low taxes, strong legal protection, and a genuinely comfortable place to live. Singapore managed to combine all of those things into one small, incredibly powerful package, while Switzerland struggled to adapt fast enough to a changing world. This story is far from over, though. Tax rules shift, governments change policies, and the next decade could bring surprises nobody expects today, which is exactly why it is worth keeping an eye on where the world's wealth flows next. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, smash that like button so more people can see it. Drop a comment below telling me which country you think will be the next big wealth haven. And make sure you subscribe so you never miss a deep dive like this one. Thanks for watching. and I will see you in the next video.